Hey everyone, last video of the year. Modern history students, I appreciate all your hard work. We're going to talk today about the Persian Gulf War. And this is an event that kind of brings back my childhood a little bit because it's really the first historical event that I really remember. And I remember this as a kid. I was 10 years old. Um, and there's a lot of things I remember about this, and I'll share some stories with you as you go. I've got a guests to help me out today. So we've got my son Connor, who you've seen in a couple videos. We've got Carson. We're going to bring them back in a moment. And I also have my very weird puppet, the Saddam Hussein boxing puppet, which I got when I was a kid. I told you I remember this as a kid. I was on I don't think I understood it at all as a kid, but I was on a car ride to Gatlinburg, Tennessee with my family, and we stopped at a gas station, and they had these puppets. And as a kid, these things you could punch with, and I could use it to hit my sister with or whatever. But so I decided to choose this puppet, Saddam Hussein. So clearly I was not a good judge of character at 10 years old because Saddam Hussein is one of the worst dictators in world history. So this is not a good guy. And we'll show you what happens to this guy here at the end. And it takes a while, but we'll get there. So we'll explain this. We're going to use him. We're going to talk about the Persian Gulf War. Let's get rolling here. And to understand the Persian Gulf War, you have to understand geography. And take a look at this map and pause this if you need to look at the map. But we're going to talk about Iraq. I'm going to reference the Iraq-Iran war here in a moment. But here is Kuwait right here. Small country. And Iraq's going to invade Kuwait. And that's going to be the source and the reason why the United States is going to get in this war. So make sure you know this geography. Look at this map. Kind of understand it. It helps you understand the whole event. So as I said, a little background. From 1980 to 1988, Iraq and Iran were involved in a really brutal civil war. 500,000 troops and 500,000 civilians died. There are chemical weapons used. An awful event. The United States actually sides with Iraq during this war. And we're going to provide Iraq with some weapons. Some of those weapons, ironically, are going to be used against us in the Persian Gulf War. But there's some background here. This region, obviously, there's a lot of violence and problems that have taken place here for many years. So let's get to the major event. In 1990, Iraq is going to invade Kuwait. Kuwait was a very rich oil-filled country, and Iraq invades Kuwait. Now, Saddam Hussein is the leader of Iraq. He's trying to claim that Kuwait was always part of Iraq. The United States does not agree with this, nor does Kuwait. And I remember hearing some of these stories as a kid, not good stories to hear, but there's a lot of atrocities that come out of Iraq, things that took place. There was torture. There were mutilated bodies. There was a story of an incubator event where the Iraqi soldiers went around and unplugged incubators and let babies die. That actually turned out to be false. But there were certainly a number of really bad events that took place in Kuwait. So Iraq invades Kuwait. And the United States is not a big fan of this. So we immediately denounce the act. And Kuwait wants our help. We denounce the act, and we want to make sure that Kuwait and the oil of Kuwait's not in the hands of a ruthless dictator, Saddam Hussein. We want to limit Iraqi power. So the United States, George Bush Sr., here's Kuwait here. We have Kuwait in the picture. And so Iraq is...
No, my oil! Stop, please!
Iraq is beating up Kuwait. Okay? Kuwait's is lots of bad things happening in Kuwait. So the United States comes in and says, what?
I'm going to Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia, right?
Yes. And I'm giving you one more chance.
So we have here, we'll station Kuwait. Kuwait's here, right? And the United States comes in, and we're going to put the United States right here, and the United States is going to look and watch Kuwait, right? Watch Kuwait and watch Iraq and say, you better stop that, right?
You better stop that right now.
See? So this is actually called, we'll have you stand there for a second. This is actually called Operation Desert Shield. And the United States stations troops in Iraq, or in Saudi Arabia, rather, who's one of our allies, and we are preparing for war. So if Iraq does not get out of Kuwait, Iraq does not abandon and get out of Kuwait, leave them alone, then what's the United States going to do?
Stop it. That's enough.
They're going to stop it. So Operation Desert Shield, they're in Saudi Arabia waiting. So there's a deadline given. George Bush gives a deadline of January 15th, and Saddam Hussein makes a very not smart decision of not leaving Kuwait, and the deadline passes. So at that point, the mission shifts from, and we're going to go back to this slide, but the mission shifts from Operation Desert Shield to Operation Desert Storm. Now, George Bush makes it clear that we need to have an objective. The objective is to get Iraq out of Kuwait. Notice he does not say to create democracy, to get rid of Saddam Hussein. It's to get Iraq out of Kuwait, a very clear objective for this war. So on July 16th, because Iraq doesn't listen, the American troops come in, and what do?
That's enough.
They come in and they stop what Saddam Hussein's doing. They go and invade, or they go to Iraq. They implement a strategy, oftentimes to produce shock and awe, but they're going to have airstrikes. They're going to bomb Iraq for 6 solid weeks. And I remember seeing this on TV. I remember seeing the coverage. This is kind of when the beginning of 24-hour news starts. CNN gets a lot of popularity during this time. I remember looking at it looking like a video game when I was a kid, when I was the same age as my son Carson here. I remember watching this on TV and just looking, seeing bombs drop and things explode, and the shock and awe that takes place. And we clearly, from the very beginning of this war, we clearly have a lot more resources. We are far superior than the Iraqi army. There are 100,000 plus Iraqi deaths. There are unfortunately 148 American deaths, 467 wounded. But when it's all said and done, Kuwait is liberated. Okay? Kuwait is freed from the Iraqi invasion. So ultimately, the American troops come in, help out. We liberate Kuwait. Kuwait is liberated, and Iraq leaves Kuwait. Certainly, the Kuwaiti soldiers help. There's a lot of important efforts here that lead to this result, and Kuwait is liberated. So that's a great result. Now, what doesn't happen is also really important to understand. Okay, Saddam Hussein, he's not deposed. He's still leader of Iraq. He's not taken out. That wasn't one of the objectives. Could we have gone in and gotten rid of Saddam Hussein? Probably. Okay. Could that have avoided things in the future? Maybe. There's a lot of questions here. But Saddam Hussein is still in power. George Bush, very popular after this. This war is popular. Any war that's quick and we achieve the objective, 6 weeks, very, very successful, that all goes well. So Bush is very popular. Almost everyone would have said he would have gotten reelected after this war. But the economy starts to go down, and that's one of the big reasons why Bill Clinton's able to defeat him in the next election. But Bush is really popular in terms of his efforts in this war. So one other thing I want to mention, again, clear objective, very different than Vietnam, where we talked about recently, lasts a long time. It's hard to achieve that objective. We get in, get out, achieve the objective. It's a short war. But then 2003, after 9/11, Saddam Hussein, we go back into Iraq because we believe they had weapons of mass destruction. Now, that's a whole other story, but Saddam Hussein's in power still. We believe they had weapons of mass destruction. The new president, not George H.W. Bush, but it is George W. Bush. He comes in and we declare war in Iraq to do what?
No more weapons of mass destruction.
And at that point, we don't just check for that, but we literally depose Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein is eventually captured. He's executed by the Iraqis. But we're in Iraq for a very long time, building democracy. Our objective's much bigger in the 2003 war in Iraq. And obviously, the war becomes more unpopular because we're there over a decade. So I hope you understand the Persian Gulf War. There's lots of clips to watch here with this. Follow the directions of the assignment on Google Classroom. Thanks for my special guest. I appreciate my kids helping me out. I hope you understand it. I hope you've enjoyed the videos. And thanks for watching. Have a great summer, everybody. Take care.